Look, we're skipping the polite intros today. If you're looking for pristine, perfectly quantized, soulless digital tones, you're in the wrong place. Welcome to this explainer. We are throwing out the digital rulebook and diving straight into the raw, visceral, bleeding edge of analog tone. We're talking about the soul that literally only exists in mistakes, voltage drops, and the violent physical struggle between your guitar, your pedals, and a glowing vacuum tube. So let's break down the exact physics of why true garage rock tone sounds like it's about to absolutely explode.
Jack White said it best. You don't need a brand new guitar to have character. You can do it with a piece of plastic. That right there, that's the entire garage rock philosophy in a single sentence. Legendary tone doesn't come from some sterile, high-end digital rig doing all the heavy lifting for you. It comes from attitude. You grab a cheap piece of plastic or fiberglass and you literally wrestle the sound out of it. Because putting too much pristine gear between your fingers and the speaker, it just kills the character. True tone is a street fight, man. You've got to find your equipment's breaking point and live right on that edge.
All right, section 1, the fuzz fight.
So to get that explosive tone, we have to start at the foundation, which is the violent collision between your pedal and your amp. People mix up distortion and fuzz all the time, but they are totally different beasts. Standard distortion, it's polite. It cuts your low frequencies before clipping, keeping everything tight and safe. But fuzz clips the entire full-range signal all at once. It's massive, it's totally unruly, it responds wildly to your pickups, and honestly, it actually relies on the sagging voltage of a dying 9-volt battery to make the circuit feel squishy and alive.
Just look at the sheer violence of this waveform. This is pure analog fuzz clipping. See those sharp, flattened tops and the steep drops? That right there is a violently broken analog transistor. See, when you push a silicon or germanium component past its limit, it physically cannot reproduce the wave, so it brutally chops the top off. What you get is this heavy, square-like waveform, just absolutely loaded with harsh harmonics. It is beautifully broken.
But here's the secret. You can't just plug a fuzz into a quiet bedroom amp and expect magic. A fuzz pedal throws a massive pile of high-frequency garbage at the amp. If the volume is low, the amp's bright cap just spotlights all that fizzy top end, and it sounds like an ice pick to the ear. It's awful. But when you crank that amp loud, the bright cap fades out, the power section hits its absolute limit, naturally compresses, and literally swallows that high-frequency fizz. Fuzz only sounds heavy when the amp is loud enough to fight back.
Moving on to section 2, the octave wall.
Okay, so now that our fuzz is fighting the amp, how do garage duos manage to sound like a massive 5-piece band? The answer is pitch manipulation. We're basically building a wall. By using pedals like a Digitech Whammy or an EHX Pog, you digitally pitch your guitar signal down a full octave. Boom, no bass player needed. Then you add simultaneous octaves, down, up, unison, and you create this immovable harmonic block. This glitchy, artifact-heavy shifting gives you a surreal, thumping low end. It's the exact same trick that built the legendary drive of Seven Nation Army.
But listen, pedal order completely dictates this signal chain. If you pitch shift a clean guitar and then run that into a fuzz, it tracks terribly and just sounds wimpy. Power has to come before the octave. You hit the fuzz first to create that heavily clipped square wave signal we talked about. Then you feed that roaring mass into your octave pedal. The pedal grabs all that power, multiplies it across frequency bands, and spits out a multi-octave wall that will absolutely rattle the room. All right, I'm stopping right here with a challenge. If you are sitting there right now running some clean digital distortion plugin, turn it off. Turn everything off right now. Go get a real analog fuzz, plug it into an amp, crank the volume until it compresses, and then hit it with an octave pedal. If your sound doesn't feel like it's going to physically explode out of the speaker, you did something wrong. Seriously, leave a comment below telling us exactly which fuzz pedal you're using for this setup so we can try it out.
All right, section 3, small amps, big tone.
Let's talk about the actual hardware pushing the air. There is this massive myth out there that bigger is always better, and we need to absolutely destroy the 100-watt stack right now. A 100-watt amp has massive headroom, meaning it stays completely stiff. If you hit it with a fuzz, it just spits out the shrill, unmusical top end. But a pushed, low-wattage tube amp, that is a living organism. When you push it to its absolute limit, the power section physically sags. It acts as a natural compressor, softening your attack and making the fuzz really bloom.
Take a look at how those second and third order harmonics are shooting up here. That is the beautiful nonlinearity of vacuum tubes at work. You push a basic sine wave in, and the amp gives you back the original note, plus a note an octave up, and another a fifth above that. To the human ear, that combination hits exactly like a massive, thick power chord. You aren't just getting louder, you are structurally changing the depth of the note itself.
The real physics of tube magic actually relies on the flaws of analog gear. When you hit a chord hard, the amp's tube rectifier struggles to supply the voltage. That dip creates what we call sag, this gorgeous softness on the attack that then swells back up. Then, crossover distortion forces that overloaded wave into a compressed region which smooths out the nasty peaks. So instead of getting harsh digital clipping, pushed tubes basically act like an ideal audio limiter, burying background hiss and aggressively punching right through the mix.
Which brings us to Section 4, hand dynamics.
So we've got the broken fuzz, the octave wall, and the sagging tube amp, but honestly, none of it matters without the human element. Jack White said, "I go up to attack the note. It really comes from the fingers, of course. You can buy all the vintage gear in the world, but if you don't have attitude in your hands, you've got nothing. You cannot program this in MIDI or fake it with an algorithm. Explosive tone requires physically attacking the strings. Your gear is just a magnifying glass for the violence in your fingers."
Let's connect your body directly to the amp's physics. When you really dig in with a heavy, aggressive pick attack, you send a massive initial transient down the cable. That heavy spike hits the tube rectifier, forcing the DC voltage to immediately dip. So your violent right hand is actually manually triggering the amplifier's sag. You are physically playing the power supply. And that results in that searing, blooming compression that digital modelers spend millions trying and totally failing to emulate.
So here is the final thought. In a world completely obsessed with clean tracking and flawless digital emulation, we've lost the danger. Analog tone is dangerous. It's unruly, it fights back, and it requires you to bleed a little bit to get it right. So you have to ask yourself, are you wrestling the tone out of your gear, using the mistakes to create something truly alive? Or is your polite digital gear playing you? Unplug the laptop, plug into a glowing tube amp, get loud, and let it break.